Brace yourself, baseball fans. Dread it, run from it, destiny arrives all the same. The evil empire has returned. From the ashes of, well, not poverty, but more mediocrity, the New York Yankees are on fire. They're coming off a 12-game win streak, the longest the team's had since 1985. Everything seems to be clicking and running on all cylinders. The bats have awoken and the pitching has been lights out. Flashback a few months though, and you'd think the world was ending the way Yankees fans were talking. The team was a few games over 500 by the end of June, which in Yankees terms mean they were actually 40 games under. The hitting was lackluster, the pitching was suspect, and Aroldis Chapman was doing his best 2019 Edwin Diaz impression. Things were looking bleak in the Bronx, and there were cries of firing the manager and GM, as well as removing a bunch of supposed dead weight from the roster. But since the trade deadline, the Bronx Bombers look like a brand new team. They didn't make too many tweaks and didn't do any major overhauls. They bought relatively cheap at the deadline and made a few in-house adjustments to the roster. So how then have they gone from out of the playoff picture to in contention for the AL East crown? It's been a mix of timely hitting from an assortment of players, as well as a resurgent pitching staff that's led the charge. Let's take a look at why the Yanks are playing so well and whether or not they can recapture glory a decade plus after coming so close. Real quick, before we start, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more weekly videos. We're closing in on the last month of the MLB regular season, so make sure to click on that red button and ring the bell to stay notified for everything to come. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to give this video a like, and feel free to check out my last video on my sad New York team, the Mets, and their annual collapse. And without further ado, let's get started. Back in June, the Yankees were in a place few thought they'd be. Before the season, many had tapped New York to be in the World Series. They saw the potentially potent lineup and new additions to the pitching staff and thought for sure they'd be a top team come October. So make no mistake, this isn't an underdog story by any means. But come June, the team was woefully underperforming in contrast to their lofty standards. There are many reasons for this, but let's start with what I think is the main culprit, the disappointing lineup. Compared to previous seasons, the Yankees' offense was painful to watch at times. They had essentially the same starting nine as last year as they re-signed DJ LeMahieu and still had core players with guys like Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Luke Voit, Gleyber Torres, and Gary Sanchez all under contract. But as opposed to last year, this year's offense started out poorly. There are many reasons for this, but if you ask some people, this was mainly because most of the lineup was too reliant on the home run. Overall, the Yankees' hitting philosophy models itself after the three true outcomes approach. This approach follows the idea that in baseball there are three true outcomes: a home run, a walk, and a strikeout. All three of these outcomes take the defense out of the equation, leaving it up to the hitter. In this instance, a strikeout is valued the same as a grounder or a fly ball. So the batter is encouraged to swing for the fences at any strike. If they end up whiffing on it, no biggie. As long as they rack up long balls and walks over the course of the season, the strikeout amount doesn't matter. And you can see this approach clearly in the Yankees' two sluggers, Judge and Stanton, who regularly lead the MLB in home runs, walks, and strikeouts. Many advanced analytics favor guys who follow the three true outcomes. After all, hitting homers and getting on base improves your OPS and increases the chance of driving in runs. So why not follow this model? It may seem like a flawed approach to some, but it definitely has its merits, and many teams have adopted it as the years progress. The Yankees have definitely lived up to the model this year as they lead the league in walks, are 10th in homers, and 6th in strikeouts. However, a lineup that is too reliant on the three true outcomes goes through some rough stretches when their hitters aren't in sync. In recent history, most championship teams have lineups that have guys who can also hit for contact, providing balance and making teams less predictable. The Yankees are known as a homer-happy team, as they just had recently set the single-season record for long balls by a team in 2018. In their entire starting nine, they really only had DJ, Gio, and Gleyber as guys who could hit purely for contact. But a few months into 2021, and not even LeMahieu could hit like he was accustomed to. Without their leadoff hitter setting the table, the rest of the lineup looked exposed. Stanton, Sanchez, and Torres were slumping big time, leaving Judge as the only consistent power bat on the team. They tried to remedy this by acquiring Rougned Odor off the scrap heap, but he only accentuated their issues. A low average, high strikeout slugger was not going to move the needle. It was not the typical Bronx Bombers for the better part of 3 months to open the season. And while the hitting was average at best, the pitching was also simultaneously average and falling apart due to injuries and poor performances. After their ace Garrett Cole, the Yankees staff was considerably thin. You had the two new rental signings, Corey Kluber and Jameson Taillon, both of whom were coming off major surgeries. So this year, Kluber has been limited to only 53 innings, while Taillon started out very rough for his new squad. After that, you had Jordan Montgomery, who's also been average, and Domingo Germán, who's also been injured. So aside from Cole, there was not much for New York to lean on when the offense faltered. This forced the Yanks to look internally and externally for guys to log innings, creating a hodgepodge of a rotation. Some nights their starters simply had to be average for the Yankees to win. But on those other nights, they had guys like Michael King and Andrew Heaney to do the job, and most of the time they didn't do it well. The starters slacking was not surprising considering the major question marks heading into the year. More surprisingly was that their usually stout closer was horrid for long stretches. Chapman started off the season on a tear, pitching some of the best baseball of his career. In his first 18 innings, Aroldis allowed 0 earned runs and picked up 10 saves. His fastball was consistently in the 100s and his slider devastated opposing batters with ease. But things went for a sharp turn by the end of June, right around when the MLB enforced its sticky substance ban. All of a sudden, the guy who looked completely unhittable looked very mortal. He consistently was in full count at bats and was blowing save after save. It got so bad for Chapman that the Yankees had to look elsewhere for saves, leaning on arms like Chad Green and Jonathan Loaizaga to finish games. All of a sudden, the one spot where the Yankees thought they were solid was now up in the air. All in all, the Yankees had their notable struggles and were floating around 500 for the better part of 4 months. Not terrible by any means, but not great considering their goal is to win the World Series. By the end of July, the Pinstripes found themselves 7 games out of first. This was their form of rock bottom, and things had to be done to turn the season around. So coming into the trade deadline, they had a few problems they needed to fix if they wanted to get back into contention. Their hitting problems were well known, including the alarming fact that they didn't have a single power lefty bat, even though they were famous for their short porch in right field. Curtis Granderson had back-to-back 40-homer seasons in that stadium. That should have been enough evidence. So right before the deadline, GM Brian Cashman made 2 big deals to remedy this, acquiring Joey Gallo from the Rangers and Anthony Rizzo from the Cubs. Gallo is one of the best power bats in the league as well as a tremendous defender, and Rizzo is one of the best first basemen in the league who also has some drive of his own. By acquiring 2 lefties with pop, the Yankees solved 2 issues at once. First, they balanced their lineup by not stacking righty after righty night after night, and second, they got lefties who could take full advantage of that short porch. While neither Gallo nor Rizzo have really hit it off yet with the team, they'll surely contribute in big spots down the stretch. Gallo has hit under 150 so far, and Rizzo is under 220. Those certainly aren't the numbers you'd hope for, but they still have time to turn it around before the playoffs start. More importantly, they're also both veteran presences in the clubhouse who will have a strong influence on the team. And the best part is that they were able to get both without having to give up one of their top prospects. Aside from the big bats they got, there are also a handful of low-key guys they brought up to help balance out the lineup. Tyler Wade, the fastest guy on the team and a utility fielder, has added a different dimension to the game. His speed on both offense and defense has been an X-factor, and he's been able to get extended playing time due to injuries to Urshela and Torres. Similarly, Andrew Velasquez, a journeyman and native Bronx kid, has been called up to play shortstop for the team. He's done an admirable job at the plate in a month of playing time, but has shown on the defensive end. Both Wade and Velasquez give the Yankees a wrinkle in their power-heavy lineup and will definitely get their chance to leave a mark on the team before the playoffs come. The other major issue the team needed to address was the pitching, and although they didn't get a big-time arm at the deadline, they've had a few key contributors that have turned around the staff. Taillon has had a bounce-back second half of the season, lowering his ERA by a full run, and has made himself the most reliable second option at times. They've even gotten minor leaguer Luis Gil, who was traded from the Twins for Yankees legend Jake Cave a few years ago, to spot starts for the team and has shown flashes of excellence doing so. Look out for that name come playoff time. But the most unexpected contributor on the Yankees staff has been the one and only Nestor Cortes Jr. The man is already a mythical legend to Yankees fans, with his slick stash and unusual wind-up mechanics endearing himself with the public. Cortes has filled an important void for the team, starting with long relief appearances, but now giving them solid starters minutes whichever way they can. And he's done just that, looking like a viable option to become a full-time starter for the team down the stretch, while also becoming a fan favorite in the process. Overall, their staff is 5th in the MLB with a 3.61 ERA, a far cry from their average play earlier in the season. It isn't unreasonable to say that the Yankees have a top 5 pitching staff at the moment. The stats agree, as they're 6th in hits, 4th in runs, 6th in strikeouts, and 3rd in whip. Finally, in the bullpen, some unfamiliar faces to most baseball fans have been the reason New York is back to shutting down teams. Chapman has continued his prolonged slump and hasn't gone to save since August 5th after heading to the IL with elbow inflammation. So in his absence, the Yankees have formed a closer by committee, with Loaizaga, Green, Wandy Peralta, Albert Abreu, and even Lucas Licky all earning saves. Even with their struggles at times, they're surprisingly second in the league with 40 saves as a team. All these moves and changes have culminated in a torrid stretch of winning baseball for the Yankees. Their season has gone from a throwaway to playoff contention in quite a hurry. They're currently the first wildcard team and are only 4 games back of the Rays for first place. But is this current team good enough to do what no Yankee team has done in the past 12 years and win it all? In my opinion, I still think they're 1 or 2 pieces away. First off, although their rotation has been pretty good this year, I still think that they're missing that elite second starter that can put them over the fray, sort of like how the Dodgers rotation is built. Los Angeles has their ace Walker Buehler, but after him you have 2 former Cy Young Award winners Max Scherzer and Clayton Kershaw. That is by far the best 1-2-3 in the league, and the Yankees should try to emulate their rotation after the Dodgers by poaching a top-level free agent in the offseason. If not there, then they can hope one of their young guns like Gil turns into that guy, which certainly can happen. Furthermore, they need to solve their closer situation either internally or externally to make a World Series run, because the reality is that Chapman cannot be trusted long term. The past 2 seasons he's shown disconcerting regression from his once dominant form. So far, the experiment of using different high leverage relievers to fill a spot has worked in the regular season, but come postseason they'll need to find that one guy who can hold down the hatch. In my opinion, I think that guy is Loaizaga. Mr. Lasagna has looked tremendous this year and has the nasty stuff needed to get guys out in big spots. His 2.3 ERA and 1.05 whip are a testament to that, and he's only 26 years old, so perhaps he is the solution to their problem moving forward. With another ace-level pitcher and a reliable closer, this team could be the favorites to win the American League for years to come. They obviously have the hitters. Now they just need the other pieces around them to carry them to the promised land. The chase for 28 could be in the works sooner than you may think. Regardless of what happens in the future, the Yankees' season turnaround is one to be admired, even if you're a Yankees hater. They've made the necessary moves to fix the trajectory of this season by addressing the hitting and pitching, getting some outside help, as well as using players already in their system. Ultimately, the evil empire is back to their nefarious ways. And for the rest of the MLB, that's a bad sign. May the force be with us.